When God is getting ready to move, it often won't make sense. When God is getting ready to move, it often will not be logical. You won't be able to put it in a test tube and figure it out because he's doing something different, unique, and often supernatural. When God is making provision, he's making provision for more than just you. Today I want to talk about releasing God's provision. This is when God meets a need in your life. This is when God addresses a situation in your experience. There is one overarching lesson here. I learned it many years ago and have repeated it a multiplicity of times in our gatherings. And whatever needs erupt in your life, there is only one source. There are many resources, that is, mechanisms that the one source can and does use to address needs in your life, but there's only one source. There's only one great physician, although there are many doctors. You can change doctors, but you can't change a great physician because there's only one source. The moment you and I understand this principle, that there's only one source, you can no longer be threatened by resources. You can no longer be trapped by being held hostage by a resource because the resource was never the source. It was just a mechanism used at that time to provide a resource from the source that is singular in nature. So I want you to know that. I want you to grab that, because the moment you lose it and you turn the resource into the source, you created an idol. In our passage of many that we could have chosen from, it surrounds the prophet Elijah. And he's in a pagan environment with Ahab and his wife Jezebel. And what they had done was they had brought idolatry into the land. In 1 Kings chapter 16, we read that it came about, verse 31, as it has been a trivial thing for him to walk in the sins, that is Ahab of Jeroboam, that he married Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and went to serve Baal and worship him. So he erected an altar to Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria. And Ahab also made Asherah, that's Baal's girlfriend. Thus Ahab did more to provoke the Lord God of Israel than all the kings of Israel who had been before him. What you have to understand about an idol is a noun. Any person, place, thing, or thought that becomes your source. Idols weren't just things that were worshiped. They were things that were worshiped to produce something, to produce fertility on the ground or with the animals or even with human life. Idols were looked to make it rain or to make the sun shine. They were things that people looked to as the source. We have American idols. These are the more 21st century sophisticated idols. And they come in all shapes and sizes, but they are what you look to as your source. Your idol could be your politics, your race, or your money. Your bank can be your source. Your job can be your source. Your checking account can be your source. The moment that source becomes your source and no longer becomes a resource that the source uses to resource you, you have made that resource a source, and therefore that resource has become an idol. Once the resource becomes the source, it is now competing with God. It says that Baal, this idol, had been erected in Israel, and it brought God to anger. So in chapter 17, verse 1, it says, Elijah the Tishbite, who were settlers in Gilead, said to Ahab, as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, surely there shall be neither dew nor rain these years except by my word. He says, because you've chosen to get a foreign source, it's not going to rain. So now we have a drought. We've got a dry season because of their departure from God. In our contemporary world, it could be inflation, recession, or you losing your job. And so provision becomes troubled. And even if you have the stuff, you may not have the peace to go with it. Let me state it again as I walk through this. You only have one source. So no resource should ever own or control you, because God can change resources, as you'll see, whenever he chooses. So there's a drought. There is no rain. And so things have become very, very tough. If you know the story, you know this drought is going to last 3.5 years. If you don't have rain for 3.5 years, the repercussions and implications of that lack of provision is staggering. Elisha comes on the scene, and God tells him in verse 3 of chapter 17 of 1 Kings, I want you to go eastward, and I want you to hide yourself by the brook of Cherith, which is east of Jordan, and it shall be that you will drink from the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to provide for you. Oh, wait a minute now. We got a dry season. There is no rain. But God tells Elijah, I got a place with some water. I want you to hide yourself. Go to this place I'm going to send you. And I have commanded the ravens to feed you. Because what you need to know is that ravens were unclean birds. They were birds prohibited by God. God told them in Deuteronomy 14, verses 11 to 14, these are the birds you can eat, but you cannot eat a raven, because that's an unclean bird. So what do you need to know? One is that it's a bird, but two, it's an unclean bird. And the reason you need to know that is that when God wants to do something, he can take something dirty and still provide in the midst of it. What you need to know is that God is not limited on his resources. That's why you don't want to turn your resource into a God, because if you do, you may miss out on God flying something in that you didn't expect, bringing it out of nowhere. Over and over again, God says he is the source. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 22, God says he takes the wealth of the wicked and holds it in store for when he wants to transfer it to the righteous. That's why you don't have to let any resource own you, because God can switch them out in a minute. He can change it in a minute. He can turn it in a minute. The reason why Israel was able to leave Egypt, as pagan as Pharaoh was and as wicked as the Egyptians were, is that when God sent the plagues, they wanted to get rid of the Jews so bad that it says they gave them silver and gold so that they could hurry up and leave. God made the sinners so miserable that they paid the saints to get out. When Nehemiah wanted to build the walls of Jerusalem, it says that the pagan king of Persia provided the wood, provided the letter, provided the security so that the saints could rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. So don't think just because you're working for a dirty boss and a dirty company that they are in charge of you, because God can take ravens and still feed you. And when you understand that, when you understand that God is so comprehensive in his approach that even wickedness can be used by him to address the needs of his people, you don't have to be intimidated by the sources because you only have one source. That's why I love Psalm 104. Psalm 104 talks about God being your only source, and he says it in a lot of different ways so that you get it. He says in Psalm 104, beginning with verse 10, he says, he sends forth springs in the valley that flow between the mountains. They give drink to every beast of the field. The wild donkeys quench their thirst. Besides them, the birds of the heavens do dwell. They lift up their voices among the branches. He waters the mountains from his upper chambers. The earth is satisfied with the fruit of his works. He causes the grass to grow for the cattle and vegetation for the labor of man, so that he may bring food from the earth, and wine which makes men's heart glad, so that they may make his face glisten with oil, and food which sustains man's heart. The trees of the Lord drink their fill, the cedars of Lebanon which he planted, where the birds build their nests, and the storks whose home is in the fir trees. He concludes in verse 24, he says, "O Lord, how great are your works! In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your possessions." What he's trying to say is all this stuff happens because every good and perfect gift comes from above. That it starts with your source. The bank is not your source. Your job is not your source. Your income is not your, all those are just channels that God uses. He says, Elijah, I am going to provide for you in a way you didn't expect. And nothing will make God more real to you than when he provides at a time where you can't see where the provision is coming from. That's when he gets to show you that he is your source. That's why Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 3 says, I let you get hungry, he says. I let your stomach start to churn and you wonder where my next meal was coming from. I let you do that so that you would know that I am God. So that when you cross the Jordan, when you get a chance, read Deuteronomy 8, when you cross the Jordan and you build houses and you have property and now you're living large, you will not forget the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. So sometimes he says, I let you get hungry so that you remember I'm the one that you need to look to feed you. So God says, I send reminders along the way to let you know that I am and I alone am your source. And when God shows up with a raven, that is an unexpected negative, a raven is unclean, negative way to meet a need is to let you know I even control unclean stuff to achieve my purposes for my people. And when you have this view of God, this huge view of God, so that you don't make man bigger than man ought to be, so that you don't make yourself bigger than you ought to be. It is to remind you that God alone is your provider. Okay, we're talking about a man of God. We're talking about somebody who says, I'm standing in God's place, because in life, things dry up. In life, things don't always stay the same. You can be up one day and crash the next day. because things dry up. It says in verse 7, and the brook dried up because there was no rain, because there was a drought in the land. And many times the drought of life catches up with us and things dry up. Things aren't like, the exciting times, the vibrant times. You want to know, how are we going to make it? Because it's dried up. Well, that's his situation. And let me give you the secret. When God has provided and things dry up, it's because he's changing the resource.
That's right. That's right.
When God has provided and then it's a wrap, it stops, it's over, and you want to know what's going on, he's shifting something. And in order for you to go with the shift, he has to make you uncomfortable where you are. And so what happens? Things dried up, and God says in verse 9, arise, get up, go to Zarephath. I don't want you staying here anymore at the brook, which belongs to Sidon, and stay there. Behold, I have commanded a widow there to provide for you. Okay. It's dry now. Money is funny. Needs are piling up. I want to move you, Elijah. So I've dried up where you are, and now I want you to go to Zarephath. So let's talk about Zarephath. Zarephath, if we're in the Bible Belt, Zarephath was the Baal Belt. Okay? This is the area Jezebel is from. Okay? So she's from this area, and it was the belt of paganism. I'm going to tell you how to live in this pagan environment because I have some work for you to do there. So if God has got you in an ungodly environment and he hasn't given you a new resource to leave it, he's expecting his presence to be felt there because you're in Baal's territory and he wants his presence to now go in that environment and be visibly recognized. And so he sends Elijah to Zarephath. He's making his way to Zarephath, and we find out in verse 10 that there is a widow, and she's gathering some sticks, and he asks for some water in verse 10. She goes to get him some water, and then he says, please bring me a piece of bread in your hand. So you're going to get water, but bring me now something to eat. But she says, as the Lord your God lives, I have no bread, only a handful of flour in the bowl and a little oil in the jar. And behold, I am gathering a few sticks that I may go in and prepare for me and my son that we may eat it and die. So we got a widow in a pagan place who can't even help herself. When God is getting ready to move, it often won't make sense. When God is getting ready to move, it often will not be logical. You won't be able to put it in a test tube and figure it out because he's doing something different, unique, and often supernatural. And because he's doing that and he wants to be seen as the source that's doing it, here's what you have to understand. When God is making provision, he's making provision for more than just you. See, you're not the only one on his mind. He is looking out for somebody other than you while he has not forgotten you. Because that is a biblical principle. Luke 6:38, given, it will be given to you, pressed down. In other words, God is going to work for you, but he wants to work through you so that he can be a blessing from you for somebody else. This widow has the same need as the preacher. Both of them are hungry. The preacher needs something to eat, and she needs something to eat because she's down their last meal. God tells the woman, I want you to make a spiritual decision to give to to Elijah meant a spiritual decision because she's doing it in the name of his God. So he's going to see whether she makes a spiritual decision. One of the tests of your provider, God, your only source, is will you make spiritual decisions first? Or will you go to your resource first? Because that's your real God. So that's who you went to first. He says, give me bread. She says, I only have one meal. What you're asking for is not practical. He says in verse 13, do not fear. So she's scared. She's terrified. Because faith often involves fear. Let me correct something. Because there's a common thought. If I have fear, I must not have faith. It's not true. That's not true. Faith will often engender fear. Because faith involves something you don't see. And because faith involves something you don't see, that means you're taking a risk. And whenever you take a risk of uncertainty and it's a major item, you often can't control what your emotions say. Your emotions tell you you're scared. Now, you can be all super spiritual if you want to. Perfect love casts out fear. God has delivered me from the spirit of fear. Well, he may have delivered you from the spirit of fear, but not from the emotion of fear. You right now are struggling because you are terrified. This woman is afraid. But what she doesn't do is yield to her fear. She has it, but she doesn't yield to it. That's when you know you have faith, when fear doesn't win. Not when fear is not there, okay? You regularly see throughout the Bible where people are afraid of this and afraid of that and afraid of that. But the question is, did feet move in faith even though feelings were working in fear? And so she says, I'm going to take a faith risk even though I have a fear reality. And even though I have a fear reality, I'm willing to take a faith risk. And when she does, it says, thus saith the Lord God of Israel, verse 14, the bowl of flour shall not be exhausted, nor shall the jar of oil be empty until the day that the Lord sends rain on the face of the earth. So she went and did according to the word of Elijah, and she and he and her house, and her son and her household ate for many days. The bowl of flour was not exhausted, nor did the jar of oil become empty, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke through Elijah. What this woman experienced was God stretching what she had so it didn't run out. This widow's story is not over. We read the story in 1 Kings 17. That's the story of God being the provider for her in a supernatural way. But her story is not over. Because hundreds of years later, Jesus brings her up again. And he brings her up again in Luke chapter 4. Jesus is teaching in the synagogue. And while Jesus is teaching in the synagogue, the people listening to his teaching begin to question him, question his authority. They don't believe that this man from Nazareth can be the Messiah. And so they question his authority. And when they question his authority, it says in verse 22 of Luke 4, and all were speaking well of him and wondering all of his gracious words which were falling from his lips. And they were saying, is this not Joseph's son? Who is this guy? We're speaking well of him, but he's just a normal man. And he said to them, no doubt you will quote this proverb to me. Physician, heal yourself. Whatever we heard was done at Capernaum, do here in your hometown as well. We're not buying your words. Truly I say unto you, no prophet is welcome in his hometown. Now watch this, verse 25. But I say to you, in truth, There were many widows in Israel. A lot of widows among God's people in the days of Elijah. Oh, so he just went all the way back, 1 Kings 17, when the sky was shut up for 3 years and 6 months, when a great famine came over all the land. So Jesus is going back. And yet Elijah was sent to none of them, but only to Zarephath in the land of Sidon, to a woman who was a widow. Jesus brings her up hundreds of years later to a doubting congregation. They weren't buying it. Jesus says, well, let me tell you about something happened in the Old Testament. He said there were many widows in Israel, many widows among God's people, Israel. But Elijah wasn't sent to none of them. They were in the same situation, but they didn't get the miracle. They were in the same situation, but they didn't get the benefit. Only the widow of Zarephath, the pagan woman, the unbelieving woman, the woman who was not part of the religious environment. The man of God was sent to her and not to them because she was the only one who was going to believe the preacher's word. And because she was the only one, this outsider who believed the preacher's word, the insiders didn't get it. The church folk didn't get it. The outsiders. So you could have people outside the church better off than folk inside the church because they do something with what God said, like the Gentile widow of Zarephath did. So you can make your own decision about who your source is. You can decide you're going to make all this human stuff your source, and when it dries up, do the best you can. Or you can make the decision, I only have one source, and that's in heaven. So if my resource goes left, that's okay, because that resource is not the source. So I'm going to watch the source give me a new resource, because I only have one source, and I'm going to follow him.